Neste år til Michael M. Karlsson. Han professor emeritus ved Høgskolen Islands i Heimsbæsje. Han underviser i 4 år i Heimsbæsje. Og i løten er han adjungeret professor i utfri flåtskapssesjonen. Og han selv om han Heimsbæsje på udgangspunkt, så han en lyksvillig toucher og lykker nok som han gammel. Og han var en høyskrift om at han ville stående lov og sosialbussen til Akereyri, og han var stående dekaner fra 2003-2004. Og Akereyri møtte Mike Kvara, det var som Mike sier, begynnelsen til det som han kallet for A Beautiful Friendship. Og heit jeg opplevelsen til Mike Legal Education. Please, Mike.
So as I understand it, this conference is conceived not as a memorial event for my dear and too soon departed friend, Kari Rekvi, but rather an academic conference held in his honor. Still, I can't help mentioning that it was ideas about legal education that brought Kari and me together in the first place. And perhaps rather than ideas, I should rather say personal visions, for these were for both of us matters of conviction, dedication, and indeed passion. So now I need to give you a little background, and I hope this doesn't sound like too much like it's all about me. But since I've now made my subject rather personal, it may help to provide very briefly this personal background. So my academic training is in philosophy, and during the course of an academic career spanning some 50 years, I've spent considerable effort working in the field of philosophical jurisprudence, of which a large part, but still a part, is aptly called legal theory. Shortly after starting to teach at the University of Iceland in 1973, I found myself teaching every now and then courses in this field, often together with colleagues from the Faculty of Law and the wider legal community. I mention in particular Garla Gislason, now recently retired from the Icelandic Supreme Court, with whom I shared in the old days many exciting teaching hours. And I spent a lot of time working with Sigurd Lindahl, our Icelandic Dean of Legal History, so to speak, and a fine legal mind in his own right. But there were others, and I was often invited to teach in the Faculty of Law, and indeed, I continue to be invited. All in all, I taught over the years many hundreds of Icelandic law students, and I counted at least 2 generations of Icelandic law professors or teachers among my friends, colleagues, and often collaborators. Being a philosopher, I pursued the annoying habit of reflecting upon what I was doing, upon the activity to which I had devoted my life. And this was most fundamentally teaching, but teaching that consisted of more than simply shaping minds in the classroom, but in other things that gave my classroom teaching much of its point, such things as the design of programs and curricula and the institutional structures that make all that I've just mentioned possible. An early challenge for me was the design of the philosophy program at the University of Iceland. Philosophy had only been approved as a degree program in the year before I began to teach there, and the program of teaching was still largely unformed. Together with the two colleagues who were then teaching philosophy, both are now departed from this vale of tears, but how young we were all then, we formulated what proved to be an excellent program that introduced such shocking innovations as midterm examinations and sequenced courses. Despite this early adventure, my reflections progressed rather slowly, but they were helped considerably by the guest teaching that I began to do rather frequently in the 1980s, and that became a very large part of my career, as it still is, although I have nominally been put out to pasture. Teaching at a large variety of institutions, each of which exists within its own special context, gives one a rich sense of the contingency of one's own way of doing things, and provokes one into thinking how things might be done differently, and perhaps better. So long as one remains within one's own familiar context, this is likely to remain a banal thought, even if more or less everybody thinks it, and may nod their heads at appropriate moments, but experience brings it to life. A particularly striking experience for me was that of teaching for a semester at Jilin University in Changchun, China, where I taught 2 courses within a Foreign Relations Institute and 1 course in the university's law faculty. In the law faculty, I was teaching jurisprudence to 4th or 5th year Chinese law students, while in the Foreign Relations Institute, I was teaching master's level students from all over Africa, mostly sub-Saharan, students who worked or planned to work in the foreign offices or diplomatic services of their own countries, and with whom the Chinese wanted to establish good contacts. Well, I suppose that it's very easy to see that confronted with such a mission, one would be driven furiously to think about how, and even what, one should teach these various students. It would not have been clever to use Danish cartoons of Muhammad as visual aids. One's repertoire of Icelandic jokes would clearly not be of much use, nor illustrative examples from last week's Morgenbladet, nor textbooks aimed at neoliberal business students. In fact, the question of readings, and thus of material, was a real problem, since one could not build confidently upon common educational or cultural background, Lebensform or Zeitgeist, or for that matter, first or even second languages, and so on. I needn't belabor the obvious, but I think that in the event, I at least managed to turn Mission Impossible into Mission Improbable. However, to get closer to my main point, from all of these various experiences and my at-home reflections, a number of conclusions impressed themselves upon me pertaining not only to legal education, but to institutionalized tertiary education in general. To be specific, I'll restrict myself here to a selection of conclusions, I'll call them principles, concerning the structuring of academic programs and the institutional frameworks that support them. I will at various points pay special attention to legal education and even to the development of legal education at Vroskapersetret, which was Corey's special project. Well, in line with what Bara was talking about, the first one is called One Size Does Not Fit All. The first and most important of my conclusions is this. Insofar as it's possible, do not copy existing models unreflectively, but think very hard about the structures that will best fit your objectives in your particular context, and once you have clear and cogent reasons to back up your ideas, try to implement those structures in concert with colleagues who are on board with the plan. One size or shape does not fit all. But this is a principle that's extremely hard to follow. The primary obstacle in most institutions is that there are already established structures in which people have entrenched interests, and these are almost impossible to change. Thus, this principle is most salient in application to new institutions at early stages in their development, like Vroskapersetret. Even in such institutions, many academics are in the unrecognized grip of deep-seated assumptions that may be nearly impossible to deal with. Once in France, a courtly old professor who had been put in charge of international exchanges asked me politely how the agrégation was organized in Iceland and assumed that I could explain it to him. Well, for those who don't know, the agrégation is a national competitive examination for civil service posts, which include almost all teaching posts from kindergarten through universities and Grande École. This examination was instituted by Napoleon and is, as far as I know, a uniquely French institution. For many French academics, an educational system without the agrégation is as inconceivable as a village without a bakery. Carre thought very much in terms of this first principle, or analogues of it, in various contexts, not only in connection with the development of legal education at Vroegskapersutrecht, but also in connection with the Faroese judicial system and how that might develop, and of course in connection with the draft constitution. Indeed, he wanted me to collaborate with him on a paper about the Danish constitution, which he liked to describe as Belgian boilerplate, since, as he pointed out, it was hastily copied from the Belgian constitution without much reflection about its suitability to serve as the higher law or legal framework of the Danish realm. A further difficulty in following this first principle, especially in regard to the structuring of academic programs, are the expectations of students, employers, other educational institutions, professional associations, politicians, and bureaucrats. Structural innovation, however sound and rational, tends to make such parties nervous and pig-headed. I taught for 5 years at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and as a junior faculty member I proposed a rather far-reaching revision in the university's academic calendar. And here I met the argument that if this were really a good idea, we would already be doing it. After a year of intensive committee work, the project was eventually killed by the administration. But long after I left Northeastern, it was discovered that even though they weren't already doing it, it was a terrifically good idea. And it was implemented and led to what everyone agreed were tremendous improvements in the academic programs and working conditions of Northeastern University. But perhaps I digress. I was talking about the limits upon structural originality imposed by pre-existing expectations. It's important to recognize that many, and perhaps most of these expectations, are perfectly justified and need to be met, even if, in the grip of well-meant enthusiasm, one thinks that this restricts or compromises a plan that's otherwise much to be desired. One must never lose sight of this. And as far as tertiary education goes in general, I must give it as my opinion, not likely to be popular here, I suppose, that the widely vaunted Bologna process, while having praiseworthy goals and many good features and effects, and imposing a welcome discipline on European institutions of higher learning, is, when all is said and done, a one-size-and-shape-fits-all affair that attempts to quantify the unquantifiable and standardize the unstandardizable, and falls into the idea of conceptualizing education as the mediation of standardized chunks of information, for after all, this is the information age, is it not? Number 2, education for what and for whom. Another of my principles is that one must always take as basic the question, education for what and for whom. This may seem obvious, but it's seldom well enough considered. Moreover, it's a question to which one must periodically return in designing and maintaining good educational structures. This principle came particularly into play when I took on the challenge of designing and implementing, with a lot of other people I might add, it's not just me, a law program at the University of Akureyri in 2003, which you'll hear about in a few minutes. Having by that time taught on and off nearly 30 years in the Faculty of Law at the University of Iceland, I had become critical of various features of legal education as it was structured there. From the standpoint of the classical model for legal education in Europe, the University of Iceland's Faculty of Law was, and still is, impeccable. And if you have a certain traditional and in its way reasonable view of what and whom legal education is for, this model makes perfect sense. The problem from my perspective was that the guiding tacit assumption as to what and whom legal education was for had hardly been dusted off and re-examined since the Icelandic Lagaskólinn, established in 1908 in order to educate Icelandic lawyers, was incorporated into the University of Iceland as its Faculty of Law on the 17th of June 1911, which is the university's founding date. The felt need for Icelandic legal education and for Icelandic lawyers derived from the granting to Iceland of its first constitution in 1874, under which Alþingi gained legislative powers, although Icelandic legislation was subject to the assent of the Danish Minister of Justice and the Danish King, and more particularly from the granting of Home Rule in 1904, under which the Danish Ministry for Iceland was transferred from Copenhagen to Reykjavik, and Iceland in that sense acquired its own government. That's in quotation marks. This is a bit too long, but I'll try and be that as it may, Icelandic law and Icelandic legal, governmental, and administrative institutions were for the most part copied rather unreflectively from Denmark, and legal education accordingly. Law is, of course, a profession, like nursing, medicine, or accounting, and what society requires is trained practitioners. This has been, traditionally, nearly the sole focus of legal education. The assumption was, quite realistically, that the what of legal education was to produce functionaries who would perform certain necessary tasks for government offices, public institutions, business enterprises, public and private clients, within the context of a hierarchical top-down system of institutions, ultimately directed, in fact, by the instant executive powers, whether monarchs or governments, although mythologically by the lawgivers, functioning as, again, somewhat mythological representatives of the popular will. What's taught on this idea is what Sigurd Lindahl liked to call lögtækni, in contrast to the usual Icelandic label for law as a discipline, which is lögfræði. The lögtæknir is trained in how to get certain things done within a certain system, which is given. He or she is taught to understand the system of laws and institutions, and taught to think analytically and strategically so as to be able to get done within that system the sorts of things that a lawyer is expected to get done. The drafting of wills and contracts, serving as advocates to parties in legally mediated disputes, litigating in court, advising clients as to how to work within the legal and regulatory frameworks or about legal risks, carrying out the tasks of governmental administration, and so on. And let's make no mistake, these things need to be done, and legal education is supposed to train people in how to do it. So it's in large part devoted to lögtækni. But Kari believed that lawyers also needed to understand how the law to understand the law as an evolving and developing system based upon principles, but at any given moment contingently organized and socially, culturally, and historically contextualized, and that lawyers needed to be able to think critically and reflectively about the law as a phenomenon of that kind, as well as technically and strategically. And he believed, moreover, that this perspective, call it theoretical, if you like, was especially important for Faroese lawyers to have, because he had a somewhat different answer to the question, legal education for what and for whom, than most people trained in, or training others in, the law. more robust political autonomy within an ever-changing political and legal context on the global scale, needed to be prepared to participate in the shaping of legal and institutional development, to construct and reconstruct the Faroese legal system. Say, for example, to develop Faroese labor law and introduce a Faroese labor law court. And not only to work as a Lagteknir within this system. That lawyers need to be able to contribute to the shaping and reshaping of legal systems, legal structures and institutions is an idea resisted by many, since it's thought that this is the proper business of politicians and legislators as representatives of the people, and not of lawyers who should function merely as mechanics. But Carney understood that lawyers, in working within a legal system, are the ones best positioned to think creatively about the ways in which the system might be reshaped and why, and moreover, that they are inevitably drawn into that role, and moreover, actively reshape the legal system within which they work in the very course of carrying out their recognized tasks. The practice of law turns out to be something more and different than the mechanical business that it's often conceived to be. Now, if a legal education is to prepare lawyers to participate in legal and institutional development, then theoretical, that is to say, freiwillig subjects such as legal history, legal culture, legal sociology, comparative law, and what is called legal theory, must be viewed as important, relevant, and even essential elements of a legal education, and not as decorative or hobby subjects for intellectual dabblers. It's true that these subjects may seem irrelevant if, as a lawyer, one spends his or her time working in selling real estate, but they turn out to have a real significance, a payoff, as Bart Larson might say, for even rather modest legal functions, not to mention such thickly contextualized functions as adjudication. For these turn out not to be as mechanical as they're imagined to be, from the absurd, albeit pervasive perspective of extreme legal formalism, which I think is a position that only appears plausible when wrapped in a cocoon of far-fetched fictions. Lawyers have to be trained, Carey thought, in Lagtekni, and that will necessarily be the center of gravity of a legal education. For that's a thing that society needs and that students of law typically expect to be engaged in. And why not? But Carey thought also that Lo Freire was important because what lawyers need to be educated for is more than carrying out the tasks of functionaries and more than a law student may expect. And in addition, because from an enlightened point of view, Lagtekni is in itself not divorced from theories of law. So given Carter's way of answering the question, legal education for what and for whom, he proposed to develop and structure legal education at Froðskaparsetrið rather differently than on the traditional model, been described to you by Barter, something of what that is. And I had somewhat similar ideas in developing what might be called an alternative plan for legal education at the University of Akureyri, about which my friend and colleague Augusto Árnason will be talking shortly. Carter was evidently inspired by what was done in Akureyri, but wisely understood, in conformity with my first principle, that this was not a model to be copied at Froðskaparsetrið, which is a different institution, a different situation, and a much different context, and which must define itself on its own premises, but rather a model from which one might draw some nourishment. And the last principle is called size matters. So my third principle, the last that I'll discuss here, is that to answer a question often raised in the racier women's magazines, size matters. Structure must be appropriate to size, as Galileo Galilei emphasized long ago. I published a little article on this subject some years ago, which has been fondly received by some of my Faroese friends. In that article, I mentioned as an aside that the Icelandic Constitution of 1944 our legal and governmental framework had been heavily copied from that of Denmark, which is itself a piece of Belgian boilerplate, apparently without giving much thought to the fact that structure might not be a good one for a nation of a much smaller size and a different situation. Of course, there are many other reasons besides size that might suggest that the Danish structure was possibly not a fitting one for Icelandic law and government, but size does matter. And Kari was very aware of this in his efforts, for example, to draft a constitution appropriate for the Faroe Islands. Here, in this very small nation, we're all very much aware of the various effects that mere size has on arrangements, on how you can do things, and even on whether you can do them. And we in Iceland are well aware of this too, despite having a population 6 to 7 times bigger than that of the Faroe Islands. We're still very small. Some structures are adapted to size by nature. For instance, the skeletal structure of larger and smaller vertebrates. But other structures, like constitutions, legal systems, and the structure of educational institutions and programs, are human artifacts and may be constructively adapted to contingencies such as size or not. The structure of the University of Iceland was not adapted to size. Its organization, both administrative and academic, was merely taken over from larger traditional institutions of higher learning, serving much larger populations, and never re-examined. I believe that our university suffers from having built up a mouse around the skeleton of an elephant. And even more unfortunately, the much smaller University of Akureyri has done the same thing. I must say that my colleagues and I tried in some respects to structure our Faculty of Law and Social Sciences, which has now disappeared in favor of something else, with an eye to size, but one cannot get very far once the overall structure of the institution has been established and become frozen. Of course, universities throughout Europe at least, and perhaps more widely, have recently undergone restructuring. But this has been done upon a one-size-fits-all management model that perceives no difference between an educational institution, particularly a university, and a cookie factory. And the results have typically been disastrous for education. In any case, these are not constructive adaptations to size. I'm afraid that it's Belgian boilerplate all over again. We denizens of dwarf societies have typically focused upon the disadvantages of diminutive size. But there are also many potential advantages, and these can be utilized by thinking of how to structure our institutions appropriately, which requires the will to innovate and should always be treated as an experimental process. This applies to educational institutions as to others, and to legal education as much to higher education of other kinds. So it has nothing specially to do with legal education, but on the other hand, those who are developing legal education to serve a small society and within a small institution must have the adaptation of structure to size particularly in mind. I say again, it should be obvious that size is only one of the important contextual contingencies relevant to structure, but it's one whose importance can hardly be exaggerated. Almost done. To my mind, the structure, and most especially the academic structure, of Froskappersenteret will need to be radically different from the structure of the University of Copenhagen or its clone, the University of Iceland, in order to provide the Faroese community with quality education in the variety of academic and professional fields that would make it worthy of the title of the university. And the danger is that the institution will wind up structured in a more or less usual way as an artifact of the way in which a university can be built up to bring in various disciplines one by one, given perceived opportunities to convince politicians that such and such can serve society or can serve a particular political agenda in one way or another. Each new discipline will come, of course, with its baggage of preconceptions. I've learned from what I conceive to have been the mistakes made in building up both the University of Akureyri and, much earlier, the University of Iceland, pleased to see that there are numerous clever and creative people here at Fróðskaparsetrið who are well aware of the fact that this particular beautiful little mouse needs something other than the skeleton of an elephant or even of a rat if it's to succeed as an educational institution of excellence in its rather special nest of contingencies. This is something that Fróðskaparsetrið must explore itself on its own premises, wherefore it must studiously resist the temptation to grab onto or absorb by default the ever-present Belgian boilerplate, and must have faith in its own originality and the courage to correct its own inevitable mistakes. I am proud to have been asked to contribute my own ideas and experiences to this effort, most especially in the development of legal education, in the spirit of Kari, whose genius is fortunately recognized, but also to the development of Fróðskaparsetrið University.
Ja, klockan är så tätt på tal, men det tar jag spår så tätt där det går. Kanske har jag gjort det.
Thank you, Mike. I'm not going to ask you about anything, but just to tell you that the Faculty of Law and Social Science in Akureyri at the University of Akureyri is back.
It's back.
Is back.
Wow.
So, congratulations.
Terminator 2. Well, that's good.